Honestly, you don't belong here. That night, Kate overheard Tony's mother say she doesn't belong here. She thought it couldn't get any worse. But she was wrong. 6 months later, Mrs. Nkem called a family meeting and delivered an ultimatum that changed everything. It's her or us. What followed was a decision no one expected. A decision that would shatter bonds, expose secrets, and test the limits of love. Before you say yes to any man, please watch the story and ask yourself, can love really survive when it's put to the ultimate test? Kate married Tony, believing in their love, but his mother, Mrs. Nkem, never approved. Despite Kate's effort to fit in, Mrs. Nkem's constant criticism and Tony's silence left her feeling isolated. When the family issued a shocking ultimatum, Tony must choose between his wife and his family. Kate had barely unpacked her suitcases when Tony's family began to show their true colors. Mrs. Nkem, Tony's mother, was the first to start testing her patience. Kate, dear, Mrs. Nkem said one morning as she sat sipping her tea in the grand dining room. You know, being part of this family means you have to contribute. We have a certain image to maintain. Kate, unsure of what Mrs. Nkem meant, offered a polite smile. Of course, Mrs. Nkem, I'm happy to be in any way I can. Mrs. Nkem raised an eyebrow. Then, maybe you can start by learning how to make a proper meal. My son, he grew up eating only the best. Not whatever it is you made last night. Kate felt the sting of the comment, but nodded. I will do better next time, ma, she said quietly. When she told Tony about it later, he sighed and said, Mom is just old-fashioned, Kate. Don't let it get to you. But it was hard not to let it get to her. Every day seemed to bring a new criticism. One day, it was the way she dressed. Another day, those jeans are too casual for a wife, Sarah, Tony's sister said with a sneer smile. You should consider upgrading your wardrobe. You're too archaic. Another day, it was the way she decorated their shared bedroom. Your taste is, I don't know what's the word, interesting, Mrs. Nkem said, wrinkling her nose at the throw pillow Kate had picked out. Kate tried to keep her head up, but the constant comments wore her down. She started to feel like an outsider in her own home, and Tony's refusal to stand up for her made it even worse. The final straw came during a family dinner. Kate had spent hours preparing a traditional roast, hoping to win Mrs. Nkem's approval. But as soon as the dish was served, Mrs. Nkem took one bite and set her fork down. This is too salty, she announced. Tony, how do you even eat this? Tony looked at Kate, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. Kate's face burned with embarrassment. Later that night, she confronted him. Tony, why don't you ever defend me? She asked. Her voice was shaking. I just don't want to cause a fight, Tony said. You know how my mom is. She's stubborn. It's easier to keep the peace. Easier for who? Kate shot back. Because it's not easier for me. Kate had hoped that things would improve over time, but the tension only grew worse. Mrs. Nkem's dislike for her seemed to spread to the rest of the family. Even Mark, Tony's usually quiet brother, began to make snide remarks. She's lucky to have married you, Mark said one evening when Kate wasn't around. Honestly, I don't know what you see in that girl. Tony brushed it off, but the comment stuck with him. He started to wonder if bringing Kate into his family had been a mistake. Then came the family meeting. Mrs. Nkem gathered everyone in the dining room. Her expression grim. Tony and Kate sat side by side, but the tension in the room was palpable. Tony, this marriage is tearing our family apart. Kate doesn't belong here. I don't see her as part of this family, and it's high time you make a decision. Kate's heart pounded as Mrs. Nkem continued. If you choose to stay with her, we'll have no choice but to cut you off. from the family will. No more support. No more access to the family business. Tony's face turned pale. Mom, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, Tony, Mrs. Nkem said. You need to think about your future, Tony. Do you really want to throw away everything we built together? For what? For this? Kate couldn't believe what she was hearing. She turned to Tony, searching his face for any sign of support. But he was silent. Tony, she said, her voice trembling. Say something, please. I don't know, he stammered. The words hit Kate like a punch to the gut. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't know? After everything we've been through, you don't know. Kate, wait, Tony said, reaching for her arms. But Kate shook her head. I won't stay where I'm not wanted, she said, tears streaming down her face. If you can't stand up for me now, you will never will. She turned to leave, but Mrs. Nkem's voice stopped her. Good riddance, she said. Maybe now we can have some peace in this family. Kate froze, her heart breaking all over again. She waited for Tony to say something, anything at all, but the silence was deafening. As Kate reached the door, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Tony, his face filled with determination. If she's leaving, he said, his voice steady, then I'm leaving too. You all don't want me here. The room fell silent. Mrs. Nkem's face twisted in anger. Don't be ridiculous, Tony. You can't survive out there without us. I will survive, Mom, Tony said firmly, because I'd rather have nothing with Kate than have everything with you in this family. Kate's heart swelled with a mix of relief and doubt. Was Tony really choosing her, or was he acting out of guilt? Either way, the decision has been made. They walked out together, leaving behind the luxury and security of the Nkem's family home. But as they closed the door behind them, Kate couldn't shake the feeling that their struggles were just only beginning. When Kate and Tony left the Nkem's mansion, they didn't take much with them, just a few suitcases, Tony's laptop, and some cash he had saved up. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get them started. They found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was nothing like the Nkem's estate. The walls were plain, the furniture was second-hand, and the building had no security guards or fancy gates. But for the first time, Kate felt like she could breathe. I know it's not what you are used to, Tony said as they unpacked their things. Kate smiled, trying to keep the mood light. It's not about where we live, Tony. It's about how we live. But starting over was harder than Kate had imagined. Tony had left behind his job in the family business, and finding new work wasn't easy. His resume looked impressive, but the truth was most of his success had come from his family connection. After weeks of searching, he finally landed a job as a warehouse supervisor. The pay was decent, but it was physically demanding, and Tony often came home exhausted. Meanwhile, Kate started baking to make extra money. She had always loved cooking, and now she turned it into a small business. She handed out flyers in the neighborhood and took orders for cakes, pies, and pastries. It wasn't much, but it helped. They spent their evening eating simple meals at the small table in their kitchen. Sometimes they laughed about their old life at the Nkem's mansion, but other times the weight of the new reality was impossible to ignore. One night, as they sat together after dinner, Kate asked, "Do you ever regret it leaving them? I mean?" Tony leaned back on his chair, looking tired. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I miss the stability, but I don't miss the control." Kate nodded, understanding what he meant. "It's just, I hope you don't feel like I took you away from them." Tony reached across the table and took her hands. "Kate, you didn't take me away. You gave me a reason to leave, and I don't regret choosing you." A few months later, just as Kate's baking business was starting to grow, there was a knock at the door. Kate wiped her hand on her apron and opened it, only to find Sarah, Tony's sister, standing there. "Sarah," Kate said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Tony," Sarah said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Tony came out of the bedroom. His face hardened when he saw his sister. "What do you want, Sarah?" Sarah didn't waste any time. "Mom wants you to come back," she said. "She's willing to forgive everything if you just leave Kate." Tony's jaw tightened. "I'm not going back, Sarah." "Tony, be reasonable now," Sarah said, her voice rising. "You are working in a warehouse. Kate is selling, cake and biscuits. You've gone from living in a mansion to this. Just this, look around you." She gestured around the modest apartment. Kate felt her cheeks burn with anger, but she stayed quiet, letting Tony handle it. "I'm very happy here, Sarah. This is my house, and I'm not going anywhere with you," Sarah scoffed. "Happy? Living like this? Come on, Tony. You are better than this." "Better than what?" Tony shot back. "Better than having peace. Better than being free. You don't get it, Sarah. I'd rather struggle with Kate than live under Mom's thumb again." Sarah stared at him, clearly shocked. She turned to Kate and said, You've changed him, and not for the better." Kate didn't respond, but her heart ached. Was Sarah right? Had she dragged Tony down with her? After Sarah left, the silence in the apartment was heavy. Kate finally spoke. "Tony, what if she's right? What if I've ruined your life?" Tony stood up and walked over to her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Kate, listen to me. You didn't ruin my life. You saved me. They never respected me. Kate, they controlled me, and I was too afraid to fight back until I met you." Kate nodded, but Sarah's words stayed with her. Life outside the Kemp's family was harder than Kate had ever imagined. At first, she and Tony were determined to make it work. But as the months passed, the crack in their relationship began to show. Tony worked long hours at the warehouse. After coming home late, exhausted and short-tempered, Kate threw herself into her baking business. But the work was unpredictable and money was very tight. Their once cheerful conversations turned into short, strange exchanges. One night, Tony came home and slumped onto the couch without even saying hello. Kate placed a plate of food in front of him, but he barely glanced at it. "Did something happen at work?" she asked. Tony let out a frustrated sigh. "They cut my hours again." Kate's heart sank. "I'm sorry, Tony. We'll figure something out." "How, Kate?" he snapped. "We are barely getting by as it is. I can't keep doing this." His words stung, but Kate held back her tears. "I'm trying too, Tony. I've been taking extra offers." "Baking isn't enough," he interrupted, his voice louder now. "You think selling cakes is going to pay our rent?" Kate stepped back, shocked. Tony had never spoken to her like that before. "I'm doing my best," she said quietly. Tony's face softened, and he ran a hand through his head. "I'm sorry, Kate. I didn't mean that. I don't know what to do anymore." But the damage was done. That night, as Kate lay awake in bed, Sarah's words echoed in her mind. "You've changed him, and not for the better." The tension between Kate and Tony continued to grow. They stopped eating dinner together, and when they did talk, it usually ended in an argument. Kate felt like she was walking on eggshell, afraid to say the wrong thing. One evening, after another fight about money, Tony said something that pushed Kate over the edge. "Maybe Sarah was right," he muttered under his breath. Kate froze. "What did you just say?" Tony looked up, realizing his mistake, but it was too late. "Do you think I didn't hear that?" Kate said, her voice trembling. "Do you think I don't know what your family says about me? And now you're starting to believe it too." "Kate, that's not what I mean," Tony said quickly, standing up. "Then what did you mean?" she demanded, tears streaming down her face. Tony didn't answer. Kate grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Tony asked, his voice panicked. "I don't know," Kate said, her hand on the doorknob. "But I can't stay here with you. Not like this." "Kate, wait," Tony said, stepping towards her. Please don't go. I don't want to lose you. Kate turned and looked at him, her heart breaking. Tony, I'm not sure you ever really had me. She walked out the door, leaving Tony standing alone in the tiny apartment. Kate didn't go far. She found herself sitting on a bench at the park down the street. Her mind was racing. She thought about everything she had given up to be with Tony, the insult from his family, the sacrifices she had made to build a life with him. Was it worth it? As she sat there, the memories of their good times together came flooding back. She remembered the way Tony had stood up to his family, choosing her over everything. But now, it felt like he was regretting that choice. Back at the apartment, Tony paced back and forth the floor, his mind filled with regret. He replayed their arguments over and over, kicking himself for letting this frustration get the better of him. When Kate finally returned hours later, Tony rushed to the door. Kate, he said. Relief washed over him. I was so worried. Kate looked at him, her face tired but determined. Tony, we really need to talk, she said. He nodded. I know I messed up. I've been so stressed about everything. But that's not an excuse for how I've treated you. It's not just about how you treat me, Tony, Kate said. It's about how we treat each other. This isn't working. And if we don't figure out a way to fix it, we are going to lose each other. Tony sat down, his head in his hand. I don't want to lose you, Kate. I don't care what Sarah or my mom says. I chose you, and I will keep choosing you. Kate sat beside him, her voice soft but firm. Then we need to start over. Not just with your family, but with us. We need to remember why we fell in love in the first place. Just as Kate and Tony began to rebuild their life, the Nkem's family found another way to interfere. This time, it wasn't Sarah or Mrs. Nkem who made the move. It was Mark, Tony's older brother. Mark showed up unannounced one afternoon while Tony was at work. Kate was in the middle of baking an order when she heard the knock on the door. She opened it to see Mark standing there, dressed sharply in a suit, his expression smug. Mark, Kate said, surprised. What are you doing here? Relax, Kate, Mark said, brushing past her and stepping into the apartment. I'm just here to talk. Kate folded her arms, wary. What do you want? Mark smirked, looking around the small apartment. This is what my brother gave up for everything for. Pathetic. Kate's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. If you are here to insult us, you can leave. Mark laughed. Oh, Kate, I'm not here to insult you. I'm here to make you an offer. Kate raised an eyebrow. What kind of offer? Mark leaned against the kitchen counter. You walk away from Tony and I will make sure you are taken care of. Financially, I mean, you will never have to worry about money again. Kate stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious? I'm dead serious, Mark said, crossing his arms. Tony doesn't belong here, Kate. He belongs with his family, running the business, living the family he was born into. You are holding him back, and we both know it. Kate's anger fled. Mark, Tony made his choice. He chose me, and no amount of money is going to change that. Everyone has a price, Kate. Think about it. Do you really want to keep struggling like this? Do you want Tony to keep struggling? Kate took a deep breath, her hands trembling. You need to leave now. Mark stepped closer, his voice low. You are making a mistake, Kate. This is your chance to do the right thing for both of you. If you love him, then let him go. Before Kate could respond, the door opened and Tony walked in. His eyes immediately landed on Mark. What the hell are you doing here? Tony demanded. His voice was sharp. Hold on, bro. I'm just having a chat with our lovely wife here. Get out, Mark. Get out of my house. Mark raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get worked up. He turned to Kate, his smirk fading into a cold glare. Think about what I said, Kate. The offer still stands. After Mark left, Tony turned to Kate. What did he say? Kate hesitated, then told Tony everything. The next day, Tony drove to the Nkem's mansion, his anger boiling over. He stormed into the grand living room where Mrs. Nkem and Mark was sitting. "What's wrong with you people?" Tony demanded. "Oh, Tony, we are trying to help you. Tony, you've lost your way and we are trying to bring you back." "By disrespecting my wife," Tony said, his voice shaking with rage. "By treating her like she's the problem." "No, Mom, the problem is you. You can't stand the fact that I made a decision you don't control." Mark stood up, his face calm but menacing. "Watch your tone, little brother. We are only trying to save you from yourself." "I don't need saving," Tony said. "And if you ever come near Kate again, I swear I will cut ties with this family for good." Mrs. Nkem's eyes narrowed. "You are making a mistake, Tony. You will come crawling back when you realize what you've given up." Tony turned to leave, his heart pounding. "I've already given up enough for this family. I would give up Kate too." After the confrontation, Kate sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. Tony had stood up for her again, but she couldn't ignore the weight of his family's words. "Tony," she said quietly, "do you ever wonder if they are right, if we made a mistake?" Tony sat beside her, his expression softening. "Kate, I wonder about a lot of things, but one thing I never doubt is you." Kate looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." Tony took her hands in his. "Kate, you are not the reason. You are my reason for living, for starting over, for fighting every day to make this work. You are not holding me back. You are giving me something I never had before. Freedom." Days later, Kate received an envelope in the mail. The sender was listed as Nkem Enterprise. She opened it cautiously, her heart sinking as she read the content. It was a legal notice, a demand for repayment of the loan Tony's family claimed to have given him over the years. When Tony came home that evening, Kate handed him the letter. His face darkened. "This is ridiculous," he said, crumpling the paper in his hand. "They are trying to scare us," Kate said, "but what if they are serious?" That night, as Tony slept beside her, Kate lay awake, reflecting on everything they had been through. The Nkem's family had thrown every obstacle in their path, but through it all, Tony had chosen her. He had walked away from wealth, status, and security to build a life with her. She realized then that love wasn't just about grand gestures or romantic words. It was about the choices you made every day, the battle you fought together, and the willingness to put each other first, no matter the cost. For the first time in months, Kate felt a sense of peace. She didn't need Tony to prove his love anymore. He already had in ways she could never have imagined. Over time, the Nkem's family's influence faded. Mrs. Nkem and Mark stopped their attempt to interfere, realizing that Tony and Kate were stronger together than they had ever imagined. Sarah began to distance herself from the family, finding inspiration in Tony and Kate's courage to live life on their own terms. Kate and Tony's love story wasn't perfect, but it was real. They had faced betrayal, manipulation, and financial hardship, yet they had emerged stronger, with a bond that no one could break. Kate's journey taught her a valuable lesson, one that every woman should know about: saying yes to any man. Love isn't just about romance or promises. It's about action. It's about choosing each other every day, even when the world tries to tear you apart. Before you say yes to any man, ask yourself, will he stand by you when things get tough? Will he protect you, not just from others, but from his own doubt and fears? Will he choose you, not just once, but every single day of his life? Kate's story is a reminder that love isn't always easy, but with the right person, is always worth it. This is not just Kate and Tony's story. It's a story for everyone navigating the complexities of love, family, and sacrifice. Watch this before you say yes to any man, and remember, true love is about partnership, resilience, and standing together when the world stands against you. Thank you so much for watching. Till I see you again in my next story, don't forget to share the story with your family and your friends who might love to see them. Goodbye.